Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to a new video. Today I will be going over the books that I read in October. I read quite a bit in October. I think I read 19 books. So all the books that I read for Victober I'll go over in another video, and that should be coming out tomorrow. So this video is just wrapping up the books that I read in October that have nothing to do with Victober. And there are 12 books to go over. So I'm going to start off with my DNFs and then talk about my least favorite books and work my way up to my favorite book of the month. And let's just go ahead and get started with the DNFs. And the first one was A Tangled Web by Ella Montgomery. The only reason I DNF'd this was because of how many characters were in it, and it got to a point where I was lost. It hurt my head. There are so many characters introduced in the first chapters, and it was just creating a tangled web in my head, so I needed to put it down. This is the kind of book I need to read on its own, no other distractions, no other books, because there are so many characters, and yeah, I was just too overwhelmed. So I put it down for now. I might pick it back up in the spring. But yeah, I was enjoying it. I think it has a really interesting premise. It's kind of centered around this elderly woman who is part of this huge family, and she has some heirlooms that she is going to be passing down to someone, and everyone in the family kind of wants, you know, the different heirlooms. And there's a specific jug that apparently has some sort of symbolism and it means something to the family. So they're all just waiting for this elderly woman to pass away, for her will to be read, and to figure out who's going to get the jug. And that's kind of what it's centered on. There's a lot of humor, and I was very, very entertained in the first few chapters, but again, just too many characters. It really overwhelmed me, so I will pick this up at another time. I also DNF'd and already got rid of A Game of Fox and Squirrels. This is one that I recently hauled from Book Outlet, and I'm really sad to have to get rid of it, but it just had some things in it that made me very uncomfortable considering it is middle grade. So it's just not for me. It's not the kind of story for me. So I did set it aside. And now going over the books that I didn't enjoy as much this month. First up, we have The Legend of Sleepy Hollow and Other Stories. I did give The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, I think, 4 stars. So that story itself was really good. I really enjoyed it. It had all the autumn vibes, and it definitely gave me the atmosphere that I was looking for and that I was expecting. But the reason I didn't like this book is because all of the other stories were duds. I just did not enjoy them. I don't think Washington Irving is the author for me. I just didn't really enjoy his writing style. I didn't enjoy the other stories. But yeah, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow itself was a good story, and I would recommend. It's just the other ones in this collection I was not a fan of. So unfortunately, this entire collection got 2 stars from me. It's not to say that the stories are terrible, they're just not for me. I gave another book 2 stars, and I'm really sad because it's an Agatha Christie book, and unfortunately, I gave 2 stars to The Secret of Chimneys. This one, I think it was just the fact that it had a lot of political intrigue, and there's a lot of blackmail and just the kind of political intrigue that I find extremely boring. I don't know why, but as soon as there are international politics involved in a mystery, I basically lose interest, and I guess that's just how I am as a reader, but yeah, this was not for me, unfortunately. Moving on to my 3-star reads. First, we have Lady Jane Disappears by Joana, Davidson, Politano. And this book, like I said, I gave 3 stars to. It was not terrible. I did overall have a good time reading it, and I do think that this author is someone I might try again in the future, but this book I found to be very cliche in many ways, especially with the romance. And with Christian fiction, I sometimes get frustrated because it sometimes, not all the time, but it sometimes feels like the story gets recycled and like the main skeleton of the story is just used over and over again, and it's very formulaic, and that kind of bothers me. I like to have a bit more, you know, uniqueness and just something different. So this one felt very familiar, and even though that is the case, I did enjoy it. It is a very fun mystery, and the characters were interesting. This one has to do with a woman named Orly, and her father has passed away, and he was a very famous writer, but he wrote under a pen name. Orly kind of picks up from where her father left off and kind of continues writing his stories and tries to, I guess, honor his work by writing stories under this pen name as well. And she ends up going to Lyndhurst Manor, where she's trying to figure out more about her mother, who disappeared many years ago. And she had some clues from her father, but she's just trying to collect more clues and figure out where her mother is, if she died, if she disappeared, what happened to her. While at this manor, she meets a man, and there's the romance subplot that kind of picks up, and that one was cute. It was interesting. It's just not my absolute favorite. But what I did enjoy were some of the gothic elements throughout the story, and especially in this manor that Orly is in. There are some, I guess, like more unsettling moments, and she gets spooked out a little bit here and there. So it was overall a really fun read, but the mystery did fall flat for me, unfortunately. I did kind of guess what was going on, and it just felt a little obvious, maybe. I don't know if obvious is the right word, but it just wasn't as layered as I was hoping it would be. It was very straightforward, and again, it's not a bad book. I did enjoy it. I know a lot of people have really, really loved this book and love this author, and I'm sure her other books are great. This one just fell flat for me and unfortunately didn't deliver in what I was hoping. So 3 stars, it wasn't terrible, and I am interested in picking up more of her work. I just wasn't as captivated by the story, and that's completely okay. This next 3-star is a cozy Christmas romance, and I thought it was really, really cute. And that is The Santa Suit, and this is by Mary K. Andrews. This one I overall really enjoyed. It was a very quick read. It's quite a short book, so I flew through it and had a really, really good time with it. So this book is about a woman named Ivy. She's recently divorced, and she buys this farmhouse just kind of spontaneously. She doesn't really have any plans, so she decides to buy a farmhouse, decides to move in and try to just live independently with her adorable dog. She just doesn't realize how much work is actually needed on this farmhouse. It's extremely old, and the family left so much furniture, and she's just so overwhelmed with trying to move in. The furnace doesn't work. Everything's just breaking down around her, and she's not having the best of times. But one day while she's looking through the attic, she finds a Santa suit and a note attached to it. And I'm pretty sure it belonged to the family that lived in this farmhouse back in, I think, the 50s. But this note that comes with the Santa suit is from a little girl, and she's writing her, I guess, Christmas wishes to Santa, but it also hinted at a little mystery that Ivy tries to figure out, and she ends up finding some older people in this new town that she's moved to help her out with her questions and trying to figure out who this little girl was and why she wrote this note. There's also a very sweet romance in this book. It's clean, it's fun. I think it's a great Christmas read. Like I said earlier, it's not the most unique story. It definitely feels kind of cheesy at times and predictable, but I think that if you're in the mood for a very Christmassy and sweet and short story, this is a great one to pick up, especially now that we're getting closer to Christmas. Next up, we have To Right a Wrong, and this I would give a 3 to 3.5 stars. I kind of went in the middle at like a 3.25. This one was overall really entertaining. I had a great time. It's a historical Christian fiction, and it's just an overall good time, but I was really frustrated with the main character for certain reasons that I feel like I would need to explain the first book to kind of go into why I was frustrated with her in this book. Needless to say, she was just characterized very differently in my opinion, and certain aspects of her personality felt very different in the first book than they do in this one. And so I was just kind of taken aback in that regard. But going into what this book is about, it is the second book in a trilogy, but it doesn't really spoil much of what happens in the first book. Only in this book, we have a different heroine at its center, and that is Daphne. And she is a writer, and nobody knows that she's actually the woman behind a male pen name. So she writes mysteries. A lot of people love her books. She makes good money off of them, but nobody knows the author's true identity. She also works for an inquiry agency. They're kind of like Pinkertons, and she helps out with solving mysteries and things like that. And a man shows up at the inquiry agency, basically asking for Daphne's help because he believes someone is trying to kill him. And the story goes from there. It is hilarious. It just has so many laugh out loud moments, and it's really endearing. A lot of the characters are very endearing, but similar complaints as I had with Lady Jane Disappears. It feels formulaic at times. It is tropey, and again, Daphne's personality kind of altered a little bit from the first book. The way that her anxiety is also portrayed, I wasn't the biggest fan of, but again, a fun book. I'm so glad I read it. And listening to it on audiobook as well was a really, really good experience. It was hilarious. And yeah, overall fun book. I definitely want to keep reading Jen Turano's books because they're fun. Next, I have a short story collection, and that is Along the Shore, Tales by the Sea by Ella Montgomery. I never knew this was even a thing. I went to the library, I saw it on the shelves, and I had to pick it up because I had never heard of it before. I knew that Ella Montgomery has some short stories. I just didn't realize how many. This is a collection of 16, but she has, I think, over 100 short stories, and I really need to read more of them because I overall really enjoyed a lot of them in here, and I will list off my favorites if you are interested in reading them. Some of them were massive misses though, so not every short story in this collection is amazing, but there are a few that stand out for sure, and those would be Magical Bond of the Sea, And this one I would say is not the most realistic, but it's still very, very sweet, and the writing was just beautiful. I feel like Ella Montgomery, even if the story itself isn't my thing, her writing just beautiful all the time. But I do have to say that my favorite was The Lifebook of Uncle Jesse. I thought that one was absolutely precious. It has an elderly man named Jesse at its center. There's also Fair Exchange and No Robbery, and this one was ridiculous, but I loved it. It was so funny. It was so dramatic, but I soaked it up. It was so good. I would also recommend Light on the Big Dipper. That one was a very, very sweet story. And there are also 2 stories that feature a dog, just the most precious dogs ever. And those 2 stories are Adventure on Island Rock and How Dawn Was Saved. And again, precious. I loved the dogs in those stories so much. And the last one I would recommend is The Waking of Helen. So those are the ones that I really enjoyed, and I'll try to remember to put them in the description box. But some of the other stories I just found a little bit boring, and one of them had to do with cheating, and I just wasn't a fan. So some of these were hits, some were misses, some were kind of middle of the road. So I think for me, a 3.5-ish star kind of felt fair, but I did overall enjoy it and would definitely recommend checking out Ella Montgomery's short stories. Another 3.5 star, we have Christmas at Carnton by Tamera Alexander. This book was a very sweet story set around the Civil War era in Tennessee. And Carnton was a real house. This is actually a prequel to the Carnton series by Tamera Alexander. This book is set prior to the events of books 1 and 2 in the series. This book is about a woman named Aletta who lost her husband in the Civil War. She has a young boy, she's pregnant, and she's about to be kicked out of her house because her boss couldn't afford to keep her on. So she was let go from her job. She can't afford to keep her house. She can't afford to feed her family. And by some miracle, she ends up getting a job at Carnton to help with these preparations for an auction that they are doing to raise money for the Civil War effort. And there she meets a man who was wounded in the war, and it affected his eyesight. So he was sent to Carnton to help with morale and just help this women's league put together a nativity set, put together this auction, and kind of just bring levity to an otherwise really dark time. It's a very quick read. It's exactly 200 pages actually, so a very quick read. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very sweet and a really good Christmas, heartwarming, at times sad story. I feel like it had a very sweet ending. It was a little predictable, but with novellas, I feel like romances aren't as developed in a lot of novellas, but maybe I just haven't read the right novellas. Yeah, it was overall a very enjoyable book, and I'm glad that I read it. It was very Christmassy and very sweet. Moving on to my 4-star reads. First, we have Shadow of the Storm by Connilyn Cossette. This was a reread, and when I first read it, I gave it 5 stars because I used to give basically everything 5 stars on Goodreads. And so when I first read this, I gave it 5 stars. Upon a reread, it is definitely a 4-star book. There are some things that I did not like about the story. And I guess when I was younger and I read this for the first time, I wasn't as bothered maybe. But yeah, I wasn't as mindful when I would rate a book. But anyways, 4 stars. I really enjoyed this book. It is the second book in the Out from Egypt series by Connilyn Cossette. She is one of my favorite authors. And this one I would say is my least favorite in the trilogy. It is set after the Israelites have escaped from Egypt and they are now living at the foot of Mount Sinai. And our main character, Shira, she was a servant in the first book, and she's the main character in this story. And she basically discovers that her calling in life is midwifery. And that is the one aspect of the story that I loved. I loved that so much. The issue with this is even though she truly believes it's her calling and she believes that it's, you know, her calling from God, her mother is not really for her becoming a midwife. Her mother expects her to help with their own like weaving business that they have. And Shira is just very confused and experiences turmoil because she doesn't know what choice to make. She doesn't know if she should follow, I guess, God's calling on her life versus her mother. A major thing that happens is a very traumatic experience when she's assisting with a delivery, and this kind of causes her to even doubt if midwifery is her calling, and that's kind of the central conflict of this story. And she also meets a man, and they quickly fall in love. That's one thing I didn't like. It was very much insta-love. And there's another aspect of her romance with him that I don't like, and it's because it has a certain trope that I really don't like. I'm not going to say what it is because it is spoilery, but I'm just going to say that the male love interest made some choices that I think were not great. So I'll leave it at that. But yeah, 4 stars. I think it's a great book. It's just not my favorite in the trilogy. There is a light trigger warning for assault. It happened back in Egypt, so it's Shira reflecting on what happened to her. But I just wanted to mention that. So 4 stars. I overall enjoyed it, and this author, she's just amazing. This next book is also 4 stars. It could have been a 5 stars, but it has a trope that I hate so much. And it is not a spoiler in this case because we know right off the bat the choice that this woman is going to make. It's on the back of the book. I don't think it spoils the story at all. And I am talking about Frenchman's Creek by Daphne du Maurier. Like I said, this could have been a 5 stars, except for the fact that it gets really, really close to cheating and infidelity. Nothing in terms of like physical cheating occurs, but it's close enough. It's in the character's thoughts. Moving on though, it could have been a 5 stars if it was not for that, because I think this was awesome. I think it was beautifully written. I consider it more of like a trashy romance, but I love it. This is a pirate story set in the 1600s, which was so fun. Definitely a swashbuckling tale. And the pirate kind of reminded me of Jamie Fraser. And so just leave it at that. So we have a character and her name in the audiobook was pronounced Donna. I don't like that because it sounds like donut. Donna. Anyways, Donna, whatever. Donna, she ends up moving with her 3 kids to their, I guess, like country home on the coast. And it's the south of England. I'm pretty sure it's Cornwall. And she leaves her husband behind in London. She's kind of sick of him. And that's another thing that I didn't really like is Donna just not prioritizing her family. And, you know, I could get into that. That could be a whole conversation about this story. She's basically just sick and tired of the shallowness of upper class British life and the aristocracy. And she just wants to get away. And that in and of itself is understandable. But some of the choices that she makes along the way, not so much. But the reason I gave it 4 stars is because Donna meets this pirate and they just go on these adventures and it is so fun. This book is written beautifully and the descriptions of Cornwall and the pirate ship and everything is just such atmosphere. But yeah, I almost feel guilty that I loved it so much, but I really did love this story and I think it's beautifully written, beautifully told. Just that one trope that does not do it for me. I really don't like that. But 4 stars, and I really love one of the little reviews on the back. It's a swashbuckling tale of exquisite danger and tangled love. One of the greatest du Maurier heroines, headstrong, beautiful, and brave. A story about what happens when you recognize passion, when you stumble upon a kindred soul. I think what really makes this a good story, regardless of the trope that I don't like, is the action, the adventure, the beautiful writing, just all of those elements working together to create a beautiful story. But I just wish that Donna was not married because I wouldn't have been as bothered. Next up, we have a mystery that I gave 4.5 stars to, and I thought it was so good and very underrated. Not a lot of people seem to have read this book, and that is The Caretakers by Eliza Maxwell. This book, wow, it like exceeded my expectations. I also did go in with very low expectations, but I had such a good time reading this story. It is also a very unique story. So it's about a woman named Tessa Shepherd. She's a filmmaker and she basically helped exonerate a man for a murder. She helped get him out of jail only for him to kill again. She was convinced that he was wrongly imprisoned for murder and she helped him get out of jail, but then he kills again. And videos of him taunting people start popping up in the media and Tessa feels like her life is just completely over. Then her mother passes away, leaving her this random mansion in the middle of the woods. She also has a very frayed relationship with her sister. So she just feels like her life is completely over. Like she has nothing to live for anymore. So she goes to this mansion as a way to deal with her grief, as a way to escape the press because they're really honing in on her and they're just everywhere and she's trying to get away from all of it because everyone is angry that she helped free a man who ends up murdering again. So Tessa shows up at this mansion where she finds 2 elderly sisters. I'm pretty sure they were both in their 90s, and they are Kitty and Deirdre. And they were the children of the housekeeper who lived on this property back in the 1950s. And so we get flashbacks to their childhood and some things that they've experienced and how it relates to Tessa and her family, her mother, and some very eerie and gruesome things that occurred back in the 50s. I really love the title of this book because not only are these 2 sisters caretakers of this mansion, but it's like they're caretakers of all of these secrets that Tessa is craving to know and figure out what on earth happened at this mansion and how her mother's life ties into all of it. And as what usually happens in mysteries, danger follows Tessa. She's not perfectly safe. And she's still trying to figure out what made this man murder, why she was so easily convinced that he was innocent, and everything just comes together. I really loved Kitty and Deirdre. These two women with their secrets. As things were getting revealed, I was just blown away. I was just so amazed at how this book deals with grief and trauma, and it really goes into what creates a killer, what causes an otherwise normal person to become a killer. But yeah, I was just so emotionally invested. I loved this book so much. Would highly recommend. These last two books are both 5 stars, and I can't pick which one is my favorite because they're both absolutely amazing. I do have to say though that one of them, I don't think it would be a 5 stars for everyone. It is a cozy mystery, and I know the cozy mystery genre is a hit or miss for a lot of people. And I know with cozy mysteries, there's not always the deepest plot, and it kind of can be very quick moving and just not as deep, I guess, as some people like. But for me, this cozy mystery was perfection. I loved it so much, and that is Apple Cider Slaying by Julie Ann Lindsay. This book, thank you so much to Caitlin from Pride and Paperback. Because of you, I have a new favorite cozy mystery. I'm just so happy. And I cannot wait to read books 2 and 3 in this trilogy. They sound great. And oh my gosh, I don't even know how to talk about this book because, as usual, when I adore a book, I don't know what to say. So this book is basically set on an apple orchard, and we have this elderly woman who lives with her granddaughter, Winnie, and they run this apple orchard. They make apple cider, they sell their apples, and one day, Winnie's grandma's nemesis, so this woman that they consider each other enemies because of their, farms, their businesses, she ends up dead on the property. And the body is found while Winnie is giving this banker a tour of the property, trying to convince him to invest in this apple cider business. And things don't go as planned because she finds this body. And that definitely makes people a little hesitant to visit this apple orchard. And so Winnie is kind of at a loss of what to do. She doesn't know how she could keep this business afloat. And yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about the mystery and the plot and everything. Oh my goodness, the vibes of this book. It is set mostly in November. So if you haven't read this book yet, November is the perfect month to read it because it's set after Thanksgiving, the American Thanksgiving, and then leading up to Christmas, which I love this time of year. It is my favorite time of year. And the late fall vibes. It's also set in West Virginia. So the late fall vibes in West Virginia, the apple orchard, the apple cider recipes. There are even a couple recipes at the back of the book, which I'm like, yes, please. It also features 2 of the sweetest kittens ever. Like, my heart. Anyways, amazing book. I can't stop gushing. My thoughts are incoherent, and I'm gonna stop blabbering now. Read this book. And my last 5-star read that I want to talk about in this video, Letters from Father Christmas. This precious book. Oh my goodness. So J.R.R. Tolkien was not only an amazing author, he was also an amazing father. This man, every single November and December, he would write letters pretending to be Santa and put them in the mailbox for his kids to find. And he did this from the early 1920s all the way up to World War II. So 1943 was the last letter. In the 1920s, it started off just for his oldest child, who was very young at the time. And then by the time we get to the 40s, he and his wife have had 4 children. And the youngest, little Priscilla, is just a couple years old towards the end. And it's so precious. Oh my gosh. I can't really say much else about these letters other than they are precious. I think that Tolkien had such a big heart, and you can definitely see that in how he wrote to his kids. And I also love that it has pictures of the original letters with the original font, but then beside that it'll have normal font so it's easier to read. So that was just one example. Let's see if I can find another one. And he did a lot of illustrations as well. Sorry about the glare, but yeah, some of these are just, oh, they melt my heart. And I really love the font that he chose. It feels kind of Middle-earthy, which I love that as well. And I have to show a couple illustrations. They are just so good. Not only could this man write, he could draw. Christmas 1934. And then I have one more picture I wanted to show. But yeah, this is just so precious. And I just want to read a little thing from the back. It just kind of summarizes some of the stories. So you'll hear stories of how all the reindeer got loose and scattered presents all over the place, how the accident-prone polar bear climbed to the North Pole, and fell through the roof of Father Christmas's house into the dining room. How he broke the moon into 4 pieces and made the man in it fall into the back garden. How there were wars with the troublesome horde of goblins who lived in the caves beneath the house. My heart was just melting with each letter, and I actually teared up at the very last one because it was to his youngest daughter Priscilla, and it was in 1943. And Father Christmas mentioned how the war made the year very grim and just not as happy, and that made me so sad. But oh my goodness, this collection of letters, so precious. I think if I were a child and received letters from Santa, especially believing that he was real, my life would have been complete. But yeah, I would definitely recommend, even if you are not a big Lord of the Rings person, even if you haven't read Tolkien before, this is very, very different, but so beautiful. Just amazing. All right, everyone, that is it for part 1 of my October wrap up. Thank you all so much for watching. Please let me know in the comments which of these books you have read and what you think about them. I love discussing the different books that I read in the comments with you guys. And again, that's it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you all in my next one. Bye.